Hello, my name is Chris and I'm a U-Haul hitch professional. Installing a hitch on your Toyota Sienna can lead to some amazing adventures, such as biking, camping, or road trips to your favorite destination. You can even tow a U-Haul trailer just about anywhere in North America. Now let's take a look at this install. You will need the following tools or supplies to complete this installation. For this installation, we do need to remove the tail lights and the bumper fascia. So let's begin underneath the cargo door by removing 8 bolts with a 10mm socket. There are 2 bolts in each tail light and 2 bolts in the bumper fascia below each tail light. You can now remove the tail light by gently pulling it rearward. Unclip the wire harness from the tail light to give you more slack. We now need to uninstall the 3 wiring connections. Depress the tab on the connector and pull. For the second one, you need to unclip the wire harness here. Rotate the cover counterclockwise to expose the connector. Depress the tab to remove the connector. It may be helpful to use a small screwdriver. For the third connection, rotate the bulb counterclockwise and remove. To prevent damage to the bulb when we remove the fascia, I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the connector and set it aside for reinstallation later. Now repeat for the other tail light. We can now remove the trim panel fasteners from the bumper fascia. There are going to be 8 located underneath the rear of the vehicle. You can remove the push pins using a small flathead screwdriver. There are also 2 fasteners here underneath the fascia behind the driver's side tire. Additionally, there are 2 fasteners behind each wheel in the wheel well, 1 large one and 1 small one. The final fasteners to remove are going to be 10mm screws. There are 3 behind the driver's side tire, and 2 behind the passenger side tire. We're now ready to remove the bumper fascia from the vehicle. You are going to want a second set of hands to help you hold the bumper. There is an electrical connection we're going to remove back there. As well, we're going to get some masking tape and protect the seams of the bumper and vehicle, so when we return the fascia later, we don't put any scratches. From behind each wheel well, gently pull the fascia away from the vehicle. Gently pull here behind the tail light to continue releasing the bumper. And now pull the center of the bumper straight out to release the final clips. You can now remove the sensor's electrical connection from the bumper. Gently depress the tab and pull apart. We're now ready to remove the factory bumper beam, but first we need to expose the bolt holes by removing this tape. Also, you need to remove the wire harness from the factory bumper beam before we remove it. Use a trim panel tool to pop it out of the aluminum bumper beam. Finish lowering the underbody panel on the driver's side by removing 2 more 10mm screws. One is in the rear of the vehicle near a sensor wire. Your second screw is behind the driver tire. You can now remove the flange nuts from the bumper beam. There are 3 on each side, and you can use a 14mm socket and an extension to remove them. Save these nuts for reinstallation later. You can now remove your factory bumper beam. This will not be reinstalled. On some models, this tab will need to be trimmed. In order to do that, let's remove the wire harness. Gently push in the edge of the tabs. We can now use tin snips to trim off this section. We are now ready to place the hitch over the factory bumper studs. Angle the bracket over the wire on the driver's side before hanging the hitch. We can now loosely install the factory flange nuts to keep the hitch in place while we install the side brackets. Remove 6 plastic plugs from the vehicle's frame. There will be 3 on either side of the vehicle. We're now ready to begin installing the side plates for the hitch. Place a flat washer on the 3/8 bolt and then pass the bolt through the hitch side plate and then through the support bracket. For your lowermost bolt hole, you will notice the trunk pan gets in the way. That is why we loosely installed the hitch, so it could be moved out of the way to place the bolt. Place the bolt in this fashion on the opposite side before moving forward. You can now raise your support brackets into place. You will have to slightly pull the hitch out to align the bolt hole to the support bracket. We can now install the remaining 3/8 hardware. Now place a flat washer, locking washer, and a nut on your bolt. You can now thread your M12 hardware through the support bracket into the vehicle's frame. First place on a locking washer, then a flat washer, and then thread through the 3 respective holes on each side of the vehicle. Repeat these steps for the other side. We're now ready to tighten and torque our hardware down to the manufacturer's specifications. We will provide a link to these numbers in the description below. We will begin with our OEM flange nuts using the same extension and 14mm socket. We can now torque the M12 bolts into the vehicle frame using an extension and a 19mm socket. Do be sure to change the torque setting as it is a different value than the previous bolts. We can now finally tighten and torque the 3/8 side plate hardware. Do remember to switch your torque wrench back to the 3/8 bolt setting, switch your socket back to a 14mm, and additionally use a 14mm wrench to hold the bolt from the other side. We are now ready to cut the underbody panel so that it can be reinstalled. This is a 2-inch wide section from seam to seam, and it is 7.5 inches deep. You can use an air saw to make this trim. You can use a metal file to clean up any frayed plastic. You can now reinstall the underbody panel with 2 of the previously removed screws. We are now ready to trim our bumper fascia. If you have a kick sensor, this will need to be relocated for this install. Do this by removing 3 screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Save these screws and set aside to reinstall the sensor later. Move the sensor out of the way until we have trimmed the fascia. In order to cut the fascia properly, we need to establish the center line. We can use these features in the bumper that are dead center and measure them to 16 inches, finding the center at 8 inches. Now using your center line, measure out a 4 3/8 by 3 3/8 section. You can use masking tape as a straight edge for a nice cut. You will notice the seam in the bumper is exactly 3 3/8 from the edge. You can now trim out this section using an air saw. We are now ready to alter and relocate our sensor, but first we need to trim off these tabs. First, let's flip the sensor over so we could see the wires that we cannot cut. Use tin snips to trim off this tab. Repeat for the second tab. You can now drill out your 3 holes, lining them up with the existing holes and taking the far extreme edge so as to place the sensor out of the way. Use this 3/16 drill bit to drill out the hole. You can now reaffix the sensor in the new holes with the previously removed screws. Before we return the fascia to the vehicle, we'd like to address the wire harness that's underneath the hitch and may be visible from under the vehicle. Right here, there is a clip you can remove from the stud and get slack to move your wire harness. You can use a long zip tie if you have one to secure the wire so it does not fall out of the bumper in the future. You can now return the fascia to the vehicle. Be sure to reconnect the bumper sensors. Line the fascia up onto the rubber studs, while your second set of hands holds the bumper. Reach in and pull out your tail light harnesses. Now gently press in the clips from the center outward. Before affixing the sides of the fascia to the vehicle, we must align the mud flaps and trim panels appropriately. The wheel well liner goes over the silver fascia. The mud flap goes over the wheel trim. The underbody panel will be finally secured with the last bolt here. Wheel trim over the fascia, mud flap over the wheel trim. Lift up and pull the bumper fascia towards the front of the vehicle as you install it. You can now reinstall your wheel well and underbody fasteners. There are two different styles of underbody trim retaining clip we pulled out. The three shallow ones were holding the kick sensor in place. Because we relocated the sensor, these three will not be reinstalled. Only the larger clips will now be reinstalled. Additionally, one long trim retaining clip will not be returned because we cut the hole out of the underbody panel. You can now reinstall your taillights by reaffixing the previously uninstalled connectors. When installing the taillights, make sure these two tabs on the taillight line up with the two clips on the bumper fascia. As well, line the taillight up on this retaining clip. You can now return the last 8 10mm fasteners. Now that our hitch is installed, we've pulled the vehicle onto level ground to show you some important measurements. This is a 2-inch hitch receiver. From the pinhole to the end of the bumper is 2.5 inches. From the ground to the inside top of the receiver is 12.5 inches. These measurements will help you determine the necessary length, rise, or drop of your hitch accessories like a ball mount, bike rack, or cargo carrier. If you have any questions about the products seen in this video, or if you'd like to schedule an installation with your local U-Haul hitch professional, please visit us online at uhaulhitches.com. You can also download the U-Haul app using the link in the description for even more ways to manage your hitch and towing needs.